The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years. It was a place where hundreds of alien species came together to talk, to trade, and to keep peace across the stars. The Council had one rule that every species thought was strange when they first heard it, but everyone followed it anyway. Every delegate who entered the Grand Chamber had to carry a weapon. The rule seemed backward to most newcomers. Why would a place dedicated to peace require weapons? But the founders had their reasons. They believed that when everyone was armed, everyone was equal. When everyone could defend themselves, words carried more weight. It was peace through mutual respect, they said. Peace because everyone knew that violence was possible, so everyone chose to avoid it. For 12,000 years it worked. The insectoid Vex carried plasma lances on their backs. The Luminari, who looked like walking crystals, wore small energy weapons that sparkled like jewelry. The massive Kralor wrapped themselves in shields and carried neural stunners. But these weapons were just for show. In all those thousands of years, a weapon had been fired in the chamber only 3 times. And those were formal duels that both sides agreed to. When humanity joined the Council, they followed the rules like everyone else. Captain Jake Morrison led the first human delegation. He was a military man, tall and broad-shouldered, with gray hair at his temples and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. Beside him sat Lisa Grant, a woman with sharp intelligence and a gentle voice who served as the diplomatic advisor. Behind them stood Greg Hayes, their security chief, a quiet man who always seemed to be watching everything at once. The humans wore standard sidearms on their belts. Nothing fancy, nothing unusual. They took their seats in the outer ring where all new species started. The other delegates barely noticed them. Humans were just another species, just another set of newcomers who would learn the ways of the Council and eventually blend in. The session began like any other. The topic was trade routes through the Andromeda Corridor. Various delegates stood to speak, offering opinions in dozens of different languages that were instantly translated by the Chamber's advanced systems. Everything was calm. Everything was normal. Then Consul Zixthar of the Vex spoke. He was an important figure, one of the senior delegates, and his words carried weight. He made a comment about the human colonization efforts in the Outer Rim. In his clicking insectoid language, he used a phrase that translated roughly to breeding across pristine worlds like an infestation. He meant it as an observation, not an insult. The Vex saw population growth differently than humans did. To them, rapid expansion was simply a biological fact, neither good nor bad. But the translation was unfortunate, and the tone was even worse. Jake Morrison felt his jaw tighten. Lisa Grant, sitting beside him, put her hand on his arm and leaned close to whisper something calming. Jake took a breath and forced himself to relax. He understood that this was a cultural misunderstanding. He was about to let it go. But Greg Hayes had a different reaction. Standing behind his captain, Greg's hand had already moved to his weapon. His fingers wrapped around the grip. His training took over. The training that had kept him alive through a dozen conflicts back when humanity thought the galaxy might be hostile. His training said that someone had just insulted his commanding officer in a room full of potential enemies. His training said to act. What happened next took 4 seconds. Later, investigators would watch the footage frame by frame, trying to understand how one human moved so fast while everyone else seemed frozen. Greg drew his weapon in one smooth motion. He didn't aim at Consul Zixthar. Instead, he fired at the energy relay behind the Vex consul's position. The relay exploded in a shower of sparks and smoke. Alarms began to wail. Emergency lights flashed red across the chamber. In the chaos and confusion, Greg moved. He crossed the chamber floor in long strides while other delegates were still trying to understand what was happening. The Kralor security chief reached for his neural stunner, but his hands fumbled with the unfamiliar weight. He hadn't drawn a weapon in anger in 300 years. Greg disarmed him in 2 moves. A luminary delegate tried to activate her photon disruptor, but Greg was already past her, taking the weapon from her crystalline hands before she could aim it. The other delegates scrambled backward, reaching for weapons they no longer remembered how to use quickly. They had carried these weapons for so long as symbols that they forgot weapons could be tools. Greg reached Consul Zixthar and pulled the insectoid into a restraint hold. It wasn't rough, but it was effective. Zixthar's multiple legs kicked uselessly in the air. "Nobody moves," Greg said. His voice was calm, almost gentle, but it carried across the suddenly silent chamber. Jake Morrison was on his feet, shouting, "Greg, stand down. That's an order." But Greg either didn't hear or didn't care. His eyes swept the chamber, tracking every movement, every potential threat. Lisa Grant was frantically trying to activate the emergency recall on her communication device, trying to signal to Earth that something had gone terribly wrong. But her hands were shaking too badly to work the controls. The other delegates stared in frozen shock. The Curix, beings of pure energy, flickered with agitation in their containment spheres. The Sylphid delegates, creatures of living gas, swirled in confused patterns. No one knew what to do. Violence in the Grand Chamber was supposed to be impossible. Finally, the Kraler security forces responded. They had been stationed outside the chamber, as they always were, and it took them precious seconds to override the door locks and flood the room. They activated their stun fields at maximum power. The blue wave of energy swept across the chamber. Greg went down first, his body going rigid before collapsing to the floor. The stun field caught Jake Morrison and Lisa Grant as well, along with half the other delegates in the chamber. Bodies dropped everywhere, unconscious before they hit the ground. As Jake's vision faded to black, he saw the expressions on the conscious delegates' faces. He saw shock. He saw horror. He saw anger. But most of all, he saw fear. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Galactic Council was afraid. The emergency session was terminated. Medical teams rushed in to check on the stunned delegates. The humans were separated from the others and taken to a secure location. And somewhere in the depths of the massive orbital station called Centrum Prime, the Council's leadership began to gather for an emergency meeting. They had a problem. Humanity had just committed an act of violence in the Grand Chamber, something that hadn't happened in 3 millennia. The weapon that Greg Hayes had fired was still smoking on the floor where he had dropped it. The scorch marks on the wall would take days to repair. And Consul Zixthar was being treated for shock and minor injuries from being grabbed so roughly. The question facing the Council was simple, but profound. What do you do with a species that brings violence into a place meant for peace? What do you do with humans? Some delegates called for immediate expulsion. Humanity should be thrown out of the Council and banned from ever returning. Others urged caution, arguing that they needed to understand what had happened before making any decisions. A few, a very few, wondered if perhaps the Council itself needed to change. But everyone agreed on one thing. This incident would change everything. The age of comfortable peace was over. Humanity had reminded the galaxy of something it had forgotten over thousands of years of stability. They had reminded everyone that peace was a choice, not a guarantee, and choices could always be changed. The detention facility on Centrum Prime was not built to hold prisoners. The Galactic Council had not needed a real prison in living memory. Minor disputes were settled through conversation and compensation. Major crimes simply did not happen. So when the humans were brought to the facility, they found themselves in comfortable rooms with large windows overlooking beautiful gardens. It felt less like jail and more like a nice hotel where you were not allowed to leave. Ambassador Krell came to interview them on the second day. He was a luminari, one of the crystalline species, and his body refracted light into rainbow patterns on the walls wherever he moved. He had served the Council for 600 years and thought he understood every type of intelligent being in the galaxy, but humans confused him. He sat across from Jake Morrison in a room that had soft chairs and warm lighting. "Explain what your security chief did," Krell said. His voice sounded like wind chimes, musical but somehow sad. Jake had been answering questions for 2 days straight. He was tired and frustrated. Greg made a mistake. He panicked. A mistake? Krell's crystalline face somehow showed disbelief. He executed a complex combat maneuver. He disabled multiple armed delegates. He took a hostage. This requires training. This requires planning. Training, yes. Planning, no. Jake leaned forward in his chair. "Ambassador, you need to understand something about my species. We only reached the stars 200 years ago. Before that, we spent 10,000 years fighting each other. We fought for food, for water, for land, for resources, for ideas, for things that don't even make sense now. Greg was a soldier before he became a security officer. When he thought his captain was being insulted, when he thought there might be a threat, millions of years of evolution took over. He did not think. He just acted." Krell made notes on his datapad. "Your species keeps soldiers during peacetime? We have never really had peacetime. Not the way you understand it. Even now there are conflicts on Earth. Small ones, nothing like the old wars, but they still happen. We are still learning how to live without violence. In another room, Lisa Grant was talking to a panel of council scholars. She had prepared a presentation about human history, and now she stood before holographic displays showing Earth's blood-soaked past. The scholars watched footage of ancient battles, world wars, genocides. Their faces showed horror and fascination in equal measure. "You must understand our evolution," Lisa explained. "Humans are persistence hunters. Our ancestors chased prey animals for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. We developed tools specifically for killing. We learned to throw rocks and spears with deadly accuracy. Our brains evolved to track threats, to plan attacks, to coordinate violence with other humans. This is not something we chose. This is what we are." A Curix delegate, a being of pure energy flickering in its containment sphere, spoke up. "How did your species ever achieve civilization? How did you build cities and governments with such violent instincts?" "We learned to control it," Lisa said. "We created laws and police and armies to channel the violence into controlled directions. We invented sports where people could compete without killing each other. We wrote stories about heroes and villains to explore violence safely. We built complex social systems that rewarded cooperation instead of aggression. But the instincts are still there underneath everything we have built. They will always be there." Meanwhile, Greg Hayes sat alone in his room and refused to speak to anyone. Station security had posted guards outside his door, though everyone admitted it was mostly for show. What could one human really do against an entire orbital station full of aliens? Greg knew the answer. He could think of 20 ways to breach the security systems. He could identify 30 weak points in the station's structure. He knew how to make weapons from common materials. He knew how to move through ventilation systems. He knew how to cause maximum chaos with minimum resources. This was what he had been trained for, back when Earth's military prepared for the possibility that aliens might be hostile. The training manual had never explained what to do when the aliens were not hostile, just condescending. On the 5th day, Ambassador Krell presented his findings to the full council. The Grand Chamber had been repaired. The scorch marks were gone and new energy relays had been installed. But the room felt different now. Every delegate seemed nervous. Their ceremonial weapons suddenly felt very ceremonial indeed. "I have spent 5 days studying the humans," Krell announced. "I have reviewed their history. I have interviewed their delegation. I have consulted with experts in biology, psychology, and sociology, and I have reached a conclusion." The chamber was silent. Every delegate wanted to hear what Krell would say. "The humans are, by every technical measure, qualified for council membership. They have faster-than-light travel.
They have stable planetary governments.
They have a genuine desire for peaceful coexistence with other species. However, they also have something we have not encountered before in any spacefaring species. They have an active capacity for violence that remains very close to the surface of their psychology. Then they must be expelled," Consul Zixthar said. The Vex delegate had recovered from the incident but still seemed shaken. "They are too dangerous." "That was my initial thought as well," Krell admitted. "But I have changed my mind. I believe expelling humanity would be a catastrophic mistake." This caused surprised murmurs throughout the chamber. Several delegates spoke at once, but the High Arbiter raised one massive claw for silence. "Explain, Ambassador Krell." "Humans have made extraordinary progress in a remarkably short time," Krell said. "They went from primitive warfare to spaceflight in just a few centuries. Most species take millions of years to evolve past their violent instincts. Humans have done it through conscious choice and cultural change. They see their own capacity for violence, and they choose every day to build something better. They are perhaps the only species in the galaxy that truly understands what peace costs, because they remember what war was like." Krell activated a holographic display showing human cities, human art, human families. "If we expel them now, we tell them that violence can never be forgiven. We tell them that change is not good enough. We abandon them at the exact moment when our guidance could help them complete their transformation, and in doing so we might create the very monster we fear. An angry, isolated humanity with advanced technology and a grudge against the galaxy could become our worst nightmare." The High Arbiter considered this carefully. "What do you propose?" "A test," Krell said. "One that will show us whether humans can truly be trusted. One that will prove whether they can choose peace even when violence is easier." "What kind of test?" asked a Sylphid delegate. "One where the answer really matters," Krell replied. not a simulation, not a game. A real situation where violence would be the obvious choice, and restraint would be the difficult one. If they pass, we accept them with full membership. If they fail, they are expelled for 100 years and may reapply after demonstrating cultural growth. The council debated for hours. Some delegates argued that the test was too dangerous. Others said it was not fair to judge an entire species by one incident. A few suggested that maybe the council's rules needed to change instead of forcing humans to adapt. But eventually, a vote was called. The result was unanimous. Humanity would face the test. Jake Morrison was informed that evening. Ambassador Krell came to his room personally to deliver the news. "What kind of test?" Jake asked. "I cannot tell you. In 1 month, a situation will arise. You and your delegation must respond appropriately. That is all I can say." That is not much information to work with. Krell's crystalline face somehow conveyed sympathy. The test must be genuine. If you know what is coming, your response will not be authentic. I can only tell you this. Trust your better nature, not your instincts. That is the key to everything. The month that followed was difficult. The humans remained confined to their quarters. They could walk in the gardens, use the library, access the station's public areas, but they could not leave. Earth sent messages of support, though the human government was divided about what to do. Some politicians demanded the delegation come home immediately. Others argued for patience. Greg Hayes spent his time meditating, a practice Lisa had taught him. Jake studied council history, looking for clues about what the test might involve. Lisa wrote detailed reports about human psychology, hoping to help the council understand her species better. On the 29th day, alarms began ringing across Centrum Prime. Every screen in every public space showed the same alert. An unidentified vessel had appeared at the edge of the system. It was broadcasting a distress signal. Its engines were failing. Without help, it would crash into the station within hours. Jake stood at his window, watching the distant speck of light that was the damaged ship. Lisa joined him, then Greg. "This is it," Lisa said quietly. "This is the test." "Has to be," Jake agreed. Greg studied the ship through the window. Could be real, could be fake. Could be pirates using a distress signal to get close to the station. "What do your instincts say?" Jake asked. Greg was quiet for a long moment. "My instincts say to treat that ship as hostile until proven otherwise. My instincts say to arm up, go to combat. Alert and prepare for the worst." "And what does your training say?" Same. The shuttle bay was cold and echoed with the sound of their footsteps. Jake Morrison walked toward the small vessel that would carry them to the distressed ship. Lisa Grant and Greg Hayes followed close behind. They wore standard environmental suits but carried no weapons, not even a basic sidearm. They had emergency tools, medical supplies, and repair equipment, but nothing that could be used for fighting. Ambassador Krell met them at the shuttle. His crystalline body seemed dimmer than usual, as if worry could affect even living crystal. "You understand the risk?" he asked. "We understand," Jake said. "An unknown ship in distress could be genuine, or it could be a trap. The vessel does not match any known configuration in our databases. We have no idea who or what is on that ship. If this is hostile, if they attack you, the station cannot help in time. You will be alone out there." "We know," Lisa said. "We are going anyway." Krell studied them for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. "May fortune favor the brave." The shuttle departed from Centrum Prime with 3 humans aboard and nothing to defend themselves with. Jake piloted while Lisa monitored the communication channels. Greg sat at the sensor station watching the damaged vessel grow larger on their screens. They broadcast offers of help in every language the translator could manage. The distressed ship did not respond, but that could mean many things. Their communication system might be damaged. They might not have compatible technology. They might be unconscious or dying. As they got closer, the damage became clear. The ship was small, barely bigger than their shuttle. Scorch marks covered the hull. One entire section had been blown open and atmosphere was venting into space in a thin, glittering stream. "That's weapon damage," Greg said quietly. "Someone shot at this ship." "Pirates?" Lisa asked. "Maybe. Or maybe this ship attacked someone and they fought back. Or maybe it was an accident. We will not know until we board." They maneuvered alongside the damaged vessel and extended a docking tube. The airlock sealed with a hiss. Atmosphere equalized. Jake looked at his companions. "Stay alert, stay calm. Whatever we find in there, we respond with compassion first. The interior of the ship was a disaster. Equipment hung from the walls by sparking cables. The air tasted like burnt metal and fear. Emergency lights flickered, casting strange shadows. They moved carefully through the narrow corridors toward the cockpit. They found the pilot strapped into a crash seat, barely conscious. It was a species none of them recognized. The creature was humanoid in basic shape, but covered in scales that shifted colors like an oil slick on water. Purple blood seeped from multiple wounds. The alien's breathing was shallow and rapid. "Medical kit," Jake said, and Lisa was already moving, pulling supplies from her pack. The alien's eyes snapped open. Its pupils dilated in pure terror. It saw the three humans and made a sound that the translator could not interpret. Something between a hiss and a warble. The alien tried to reach for something on the console, but Greg moved faster, catching its hand gently but firmly. "Easy," Greg said, keeping his voice soft despite restraining the creature. "We are here to help." The alien fought for a moment, thrashing weakly against Greg's grip. Then it seemed to see their uniforms, the medical supplies in Lisa's hands, the lack of weapons at their belts. The alien went limp, making a sound that might have been sobbing. Lisa worked quickly. She applied synthetic tissue patches to the worst wounds. She administered broad-spectrum antibiotics that worked on most known biology. She set up a portable blood synthesizer that would help replace what the alien had lost. Gradually, the creature's color shifted from sickly gray to healthier blues and greens. "Can you understand us?" Jake asked, activating the universal translator built into his suit. The alien made a series of clicks and whistles. The translator struggled, processing the unfamiliar language. Then words appeared on their helmet displays. "You help? Not kill?" "Not kill," Jake confirmed. "We are taking you to safety." "To the station." "No!" The alien surged upright with surprising strength. All three humans stepped back, startled. "Not station." "They there?" "Watching." Jake and Greg exchanged glances. Lisa kept her hand steady on the medical equipment. "Who is watching?" she asked carefully. The alien pointed a shaking hand at the viewport where Centrum Prime hung like a jewel against the stars. "Hunters, track me. Use station sensors. Find me there. Kill me there." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was becoming much more complicated than a simple rescue. "Why are they hunting you?" The alien's scales rippled through a dozen colors before settling on deep crimson. "Eyewitness. Saw them. Kill colony. Harvest technology. Report to council. They stop me, chase me. Hurt me, pirates," Greg said quietly, operating in council space. "If we bring this alien to the station, the pirates will know," Lisa added. "They might attack to silence a witness." Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Every instinct screamed at him to protect this injured creature, to arm themselves, to prepare for a fight. The old human response, meet violence with violence. But that was exactly what the council feared about humanity. That was exactly what they were testing. "We go back to the station," Jake said finally. "We report everything to Ambassador Krell. We let the council handle the pirates." "Sir," Greg said carefully, "if the pirates are using council sensors, they already know we are here. They already know we have their witness. They might attack before we reach safety. Then we better fly fast." They transferred the alien to their shuttle. The creature was weak but conscious, leaning against Lisa for support. Jake pushed the shuttle's engines hard, racing back toward Centrum Prime. He watched the sensor display constantly, looking for any sign of pursuit. For 30 minutes, nothing happened. The station grew larger in the viewport. They were going to make it. Then the alarm screamed. 3 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel, appearing around them in perfect attack formation. They were military-grade vessels, heavily armed, broadcasting no identification. The lead ship opened a communication channel. A voice came through, translated into flat, emotionless words by the computer. "Surrender the fugitive. Leave now, or die." Jake looked at his crew. Greg's jaw was tight, his hands clenched into fists. Lisa's eyes were wide but steady. The alien witness huddled in the passenger seat, its scales pulsing with terror. "We are unarmed," Jake said into the communication system. "We are a diplomatic shuttle from the Galactic Council. You are threatening an official vessel. Final warning. Targeting locks activated on all 3 pirate ships. Weapons systems were charging." Jake's hand moved toward the thruster controls. He calculated evasion patterns in his head, Every simulation he had ever run told him they could not escape 3 military ships in a civilian shuttle. They would be destroyed in seconds. Then Greg spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "Captain." "Don't," Jake looked at him. Greg was staring at the empty weapon console, which was powered down. Useless. "If we run, they will shoot us. If we try to fight with a shuttle that has no weapons, we die. But if we do nothing, they murder us and the witness," Lisa finished. "Maybe," Greg said. "Or maybe the council is watching. Maybe this is still the test. Maybe we trust the system we are trying to join." Jake Morrison had commanded military vessels through hostile space. He had made life and death decisions for crews under his command. He had faced threats that would have broken weaker officers. But this moment, sitting in an unarmed shuttle with death seconds away, was the hardest decision of his life. He powered down the engines completely. He opened a channel to the pirates. "This shuttle is under the protection of the Galactic Council. We carry a witness to your crimes. You can kill us, but you cannot silence the truth. The Council is watching. Everyone is watching. You have one chance to surrender peacefully. Silence." The targeting locks remained active. The pirate weapons continued charging. Jake felt sweat running down his back inside his environmental suit. Beside him, Lisa was praying quietly in a language the translator did not recognize. Behind them, Greg was trembling, every muscle locked tight from the effort of not acting on his training. The alien witness reached out with one scaled hand and touched Jake's shoulder. "Thank you," the translator rendered. "Thank you for trying." Then on the long-range sensors, new contacts appeared. Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel all around Centrum Prime. Dozens of them. The entire Council security fleet arriving in perfect formation. Ambassador Krell's voice came through on the emergency channel. "Unidentified vessels, this is Council security. Power down your weapons immediately. You are surrounded." The 3 pirate ships held position for 5 seconds that felt like 5 years. Then their engines flared bright. They jumped to faster-than-light travel, fleeing into the dark between stars. Jake let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Behind him, Greg Hayes was shaking violently, adrenaline draining from his system. Lisa was crying silently, tears running down her face inside her helmet. They limped back to Centrum Prime in silence. The alien witness kept touching Jake's shoulder, making sounds the translator rendered as gratitude over and over again. Ambassador Krell was waiting for them in the docking bay. His crystalline form seemed to glow brighter than before. "You passed," he said simply. The Grand Chamber had never seen so many observers. Every seat was filled. The galleries overflowed with representatives from species across the galaxy. News of the incident had spread through faster-than-light communication networks in hours. 3 humans had faced certain death while unarmed and chose trust over violence. The story captivated billions of beings across thousands of worlds. Jake Morrison stood before the High Arbiter, flanked by Lisa Grant and Greg Hayes. They looked exhausted. The rescue mission had happened only 12 hours ago, and none of them had slept. But they stood straight, heads high, ready to face whatever judgment the Council would deliver. Behind them sat the alien they had rescued, now healthy and wearing a specially prepared environmental suit. The creature's scales shifted through calm blue and green colors. It had already given testimony to the Council investigators, describing the pirate attack on its colony and its desperate flight to report the crime. Ambassador Krell approached the central podium. His crystalline body caught the chamber's light and scattered it across the walls in patterns that seemed almost like a celebration. "The test is complete," he announced. "The Council must now decide on humanity's application for full membership." The High Arbiter leaned forward. It was a Krayler, an ancient being whose armored shell bore the marks of 12,000 years of service. Its voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "Captain Jake Morrison, you and your crew face certain death. You were unarmed against overwhelming force. Your species' history suggests you should have fought or fled. Yet you placed your trust in this council, in a system you barely understood, in species you had known for only weeks." Why? Jake stepped forward. He had prepared a careful diplomatic speech. He had rehearsed it with Lisa for hours, but standing there, looking up at the High Arbiter, remembering the feel of those targeting locks on his shuttle, he abandoned the prepared words for simple truth. "Because we are tired," he said. "Humanity has spent 10,000 years fighting. We fought each other for food, for water, for land, for ideas, for pride, for revenge. We are very good at fighting. Maybe too good. When we met you, when we learned about the Galactic Council, we saw something we had never achieved on our own. We saw real peace. Not peace because everyone was too exhausted to fight. Not peace because one side had bigger weapons. Real peace built on mutual understanding and respect. We want that. We need that. So when the moment came to fight or trust, we chose trust. Not because we are naive, but because we are tired of what fighting costs us. The chamber was completely silent. Delegates from hundreds of species listened to Jake's words. The High Arbiter's ancient eyes studied the three humans carefully. Security Chief Greg Hayes, the High Arbiter, said, "You have remained silent throughout these proceedings. Speak now. Do you agree with your captain's decision?" Greg stepped forward reluctantly. He was not comfortable with public speaking. His job was action, not words. But the High Arbiter had asked, so he would answer. "Every instinct I have says we should be dead right now," Greg said slowly. "Every training scenario I ever ran says what we did was suicide. Sitting still while hostile ships charged weapons and prepared to fire goes against everything I was taught." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "But my instincts and my training are products of human history. They kept us alive when the galaxy was unknown and possibly hostile. They served us well for a long time, but we are not in that situation anymore. If humanity is going to grow beyond what we have been, we have to be willing to risk death for what we want to become. So yes, I agree with the captain. I would make the same choice again, even knowing how terrified I was." Ambassador Krell turned to address the full council. "Members of the Galactic Council, I have studied humanity extensively over these past weeks. They are violent, yes. Their capacity for harm exceeds almost any species we have encountered. A single human soldier with basic training could likely defeat a dozen of our ceremonial guards. But they are also something else, something we have never seen before. They are a species consciously choosing to evolve beyond their nature. They see their own flaws clearly, and they actively work to overcome those flaws. This is not common. Most species that reach space travel do so only after millions of years of evolution, have slowly reduced their violent instincts. Humans have done this in centuries through pure force of will and cultural change." Krell activated a holographic display showing Earth. Cities glowed on the night side. "They are dangerous, but they are not reckless. They can be trusted because they understand, more than any of us, the true cost of violence. They have seen it up close. They have lived it, and they have decided it is not the future they want." Consul Zixthar, the Vex delegate, rose from his seat. He had been the one Greg grabbed during the incident. "I was the victim of human violence. I felt their strength firsthand. How can you ask us to trust them? Because they could have killed you," Krell said gently. "Security Chief Hayes could have snapped your neck in the confusion. He could have used you as a shield. He could have hurt you badly, but he did not. Even in the grip of instinct, even when his training took over, he still showed restraint. That is what makes humans unique. Even their violence has limits they choose to impose on themselves." The High Arbiter called for a vote on human membership. One by one, species registered their decision. The process took over an hour. When it finished, the numbers appeared on the central display. 847 in favor, 23 opposed, 14 abstaining. "The motion carries," the High Arbiter announced. "Humanity is granted full membership in the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities." A cheer went up from the human section of the gallery. Jake felt Lisa grab his hand and squeeze it tight. Greg stood motionless, but a small smile crossed his face. But the High Arbiter was not finished. However, Ambassador Krell has proposed a modification to Council protocols regarding the human delegation. The Council must vote on this as well. Ambassador Krell, present your proposal. Krell activated a new holographic document. The standing rule of this Grand Chamber is that all delegates must be armed. This rule has existed for 12,000 years. It was established to maintain mutual respect through mutual vulnerability. Everyone armed means everyone equal. However, I propose an exception for humanity. I propose that the human delegation be the only species permitted, and indeed required, to enter this chamber unarmed. A shocked murmur spread through the chamber. Many delegates began speaking at once. Consul Zixthar stood again. "This makes no sense. If they are dangerous, should they not be the most restricted?" "They are dangerous," Krell agreed. "That is precisely why they must be unarmed. The weapons we carry are symbolic. They are ceremonial. We have forgotten what true violence looks like. We draw our weapons perhaps once in a lifetime, for formal duels that both sides agree to. But humans remember. For them, a weapon is not a symbol. It is a tool they are trained to use with deadly efficiency. Security Chief Hayes proved that when he disarmed 3 delegates in seconds using a weapon he had carried for show. Krell's voice grew stronger. If we allow humans to carry weapons in this chamber, we create a situation where the most dangerous species is also the most capable of using those weapons. But if we require them to enter unarmed, we place them at a disadvantage that forces them to rely on words instead of force. We make them vulnerable, and in doing so, we protect ourselves. But there is more to my proposal than safety, Krell continued. We also send a message. We tell humanity that we trust them to control their nature, without the crutch of weapons. We tell ourselves that true peace comes not from equal capacity for violence, but from choosing nonviolence. The human delegation will be unarmed not as punishment, but as honor. They will walk into this chamber defenseless, and in doing so, they will remind us all what real courage means. Lisa Grant whispered to Jake. He is making us a symbol. I know, Jake whispered back. I am not sure how I feel about that. The High Arbiter called for discussion. For 2 hours, delegates debated the proposal. Some argued it was unfair to humans. Others said it was necessary for safety. A few suggested that maybe all delegates should be unarmed, that perhaps the old tradition had outlived its usefulness. Finally, the vote was called. This time it was closer, 632 in favor. 228 opposed. 24 abstaining. The motion carries, the High Arbiter announced. From this day forward, the human delegation to the Galactic Council will enter the Grand Chamber unarmed. Let it be recorded that this is not a restriction, but a recognition. Let it be known that humans are trusted to keep peace without weapons, and in that trust we place our faith in their continued evolution. Jake Morrison looked down at the sidearm on his belt. He had worn it for weeks, never expecting to use it, carrying it only because council rules required it. Now he would never wear it in this chamber again. He felt strangely relieved. The session ended. The delegates filed out slowly, many stopping to speak with the human delegation, offering congratulations or simply expressing curiosity. The alien witness approached Jake and touched his hand with its scaled fingers. You saved my life, it said through the translator. You risked everything for a stranger. My people will remember this. The news spread across human space faster than any ship could travel. Earth's communication networks glowed with the story of 3 humans who faced death unarmed and lived to tell about it. They were called heroes. They were called fools. They were called the beginning of something new. Children heard the story from their parents. The Unarmed 3, they called them. Though Jake Morrison hated the nickname, students studied the incident in schools, analyzing the decision from every angle. Military academies debated whether Jake had been brave or reckless. Philosophers wrote papers about the meaning of trust in an uncertain universe. But nowhere was the impact felt more strongly than in the Galactic Council itself. The organization that had remained largely unchanged for 12,000 years suddenly found itself questioning everything. 3 months after the incident, Jake Morrison walked into the Grand Chamber for a regular session on trade agreements. He wore his diplomatic uniform but no weapon. Lisa Grant and Greg Hayes walked beside him, also unarmed. Every other delegate in the room carried their ceremonial weapons as they had for millennia. The session proceeded normally, but Jake noticed delegates watching them. Not with fear or suspicion, but with something else. Curiosity, perhaps. Or maybe respect. The humans took their seats in the outer ring and participated in the discussion like any other delegation. But after the session ended, something unusual happened. A delegate from the sylphid species approached them. The being of living gas swirled in its containment sphere, colors shifting with emotion. I have been thinking about your people, the sylphid said through its translator. About your choice to enter unarmed. It made me wonder, why do I carry this weapon? I have worn it for 300 years and never drawn it. What is its purpose? Is it truly for protection, or is it just habit? I cannot answer that for you, Jake said carefully. Each species must decide for themselves. But you have decided, the sylphid replied. You have shown that vulnerability can be strength. That is a difficult lesson. My people will discuss this. Over the following months, more delegates approached the human delegation with similar thoughts. The Luminari began a cultural debate about the meaning of ceremonial weapons. A faction of Kraylor youth started a movement to enter the chamber unarmed, though their elders quickly shut it down. The council that had been stable for so long was changing, and humans were the catalyst. Greg Hayes left his position as security chief after a year. He was offered a job training council security forces, teaching them what humanity had learned through centuries of conflict. His first class was awkward. 20 different species, none of them naturally violent, trying to learn combat techniques from a human. "Why are we learning this?" asked a vexed student. "Violence is forbidden in the council. Violence is possible in the universe," Greg replied. "The pirates who attacked that Valorian ship proved that. Peace is wonderful, but peace maintained by ignorance is fragile. You need to understand violence to truly reject it. You need to know what you are choosing not to do." He taught them hand-to-hand combat, tactical thinking, threat assessment, but more importantly, he taught them restraint. He taught them how to recognize the moment when violence becomes the easier choice and how to step back from that moment. "Humans are good at violence," he told his students. "But our real strength is that we are also good at stopping ourselves. That is what you need to learn. Not how to hurt, but how to choose not to hurt." Lisa Grant became the human ambassador to the council. Her understanding of human psychology made her invaluable in helping other species understand her people. She wrote papers, gave lectures, and spent countless hours in conversation with delegates from across the galaxy. She also worked on a special project, a detailed guide to human culture for other species. It explained human history, human emotions, human customs. It warned about human instincts and explained human efforts to overcome them. The guide became required reading for all new council members. "We are not perfect," she wrote in the introduction. "We are not peaceful by nature. We are not even particularly wise, but we are trying every day to be better than our history. We are trying to build something that our ancestors would not recognize, a human civilization that values peace over power. It is hard work. It will always be hard work, but we believe it is worth doing." Jake Morrison remained as the human delegation leader for 5 years. Every session, he walked into the Grand Chamber unarmed, past delegates who carried weapons. Every session, he made his arguments with nothing but words and evidence. Every session, he proved that humans could be trusted, but the work was exhausting. Constantly being a symbol, constantly being watched, constantly carrying the weight of his species' reputation wore him down. After 5 years, he resigned and returned to Earth. A younger officer, a woman named Kate Fisher, took his place. On his last day in the council, the High Arbiter called a special session. Jake stood before the assembled delegates, uncomfortable with the attention. "Captain Morrison," the High Arbiter said, "you have served with distinction. You have represented your species with honor. But more than that, you have changed this council. You have reminded us that peace is not a natural state. It is a choice that must be made again and again every day. You have shown us what it means to trust, and in doing so, you have earned our trust in return." The High Arbiter gestured to the walls of the chamber. "We are adding something to this room. A reminder for all future generations." A panel slid aside, revealing a new plaque embedded in the wall. It showed 3 human figures standing together unarmed. Beneath it, words were written in every known language. In memory of the day humans taught the galaxy that the strongest weapon is the courage to lay down your arms. Jake felt tears prickling his eyes. Lisa and Greg stood beside him, and he saw they were crying too. The years passed. The story became legend. The legend became history. The history became part of council culture. Young species joining the council heard about the unarmed 3 and learned what true peace meant. Some species began to question their own traditions. A few even chose to follow humanity's example, entering the chamber without weapons. The council did not require it, but they allowed it. Slowly, very slowly, the culture of ceremonial weapons began to fade. Not all changes were smooth. Some species resented humanity's influence. Some feared that humans were becoming too powerful within the council. Some worried that the lesson of nonviolence would make the galaxy weak. But humanity kept proving itself, session after session, year after year. They participated in council decisions. They mediated disputes. They contributed to cultural exchanges and scientific collaborations. They showed that a species with a violent past could build a peaceful future. Greg Hayes retired after 15 years of teaching. His students had spread throughout council security forces. bringing new skills and new philosophies. They called themselves the Hayes Method, a combination of combat training and ethical restraint. Lisa Grant served as ambassador for 20 years before age, and exhaustion forced her to retire. She returned to Earth and wrote a memoir that became a bestseller across multiple species. We Were Never Saints told the honest story of humanity's struggle to join the galactic community. Jake Morrison lived quietly on Earth, refusing most interview requests, avoiding the spotlight. But sometimes, late at night, he would look up at the stars and think about that moment in the shuttle. The moment when death was certain, when every instinct screamed at him to act and he chose to be still. He never regretted that choice. It had cost him 5 years of his life, had made him a symbol he never wanted to be, had changed him in ways he was still discovering, but it had also given humanity a future among the stars. 50 years after the incident, the Galactic Council held a ceremony. The Grand Chamber was packed with delegates from across the galaxy. The High Arbiter, a different individual but carrying the same title, stood at the central podium. "We gather today to commemorate an anniversary," the High Arbiter said. 50 years ago, 3 humans faced a test that changed this council forever. They taught us that vulnerability is not weakness. They taught us that trust must sometimes come before proof. They taught us that the capacity for violence and the choice not to use it are both essential to true civilization. The High Arbiter gestured to the gallery where a few special guests sat. Jake Morrison was there, old now and gray, but still strong. Lisa Grant sat beside him, using a cane but still sharp-eyed. Greg Hayes had passed away 2 years earlier, but his daughter represented him. "We ask these honored guests to come forward," the High Arbiter said. They walked to the center of the chamber slowly. Every delegate stood as they passed. It was a gesture of respect that had not been given in council history for 3,000 years. The High Arbiter presented them each with a crystal sculpture, a luminary art form that captured light and held it forever. "These will shine as long as light exists in the universe," the High Arbiter said, "just as your actions will shine in our collective memory." Jake accepted the sculpture, feeling its weight in his hands. He looked around the chamber at the hundreds of species gathered there. He saw the empty weapons holsters,